I'm Matt Carey, documentary editor at Deadline, and we are in the Deadline studio at the Toronto Film Festival with Eddie Huang, the director of Vice is Broke. Thanks for being with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the world premiere of your film.
Yeah.
You know Vice very, very well, having done a show there. Talk about the ambition that Vice had. It was pretty sky high. They really wanted to kind of take over the world.
Yeah, I always saw Shane as like the Williamsburg Genghis Khan.
And Shane is Shane Smith, who was one of the co-founders. Genghis Khan. Ah, okay. Marauding through the steppes and on his way to world domination. How big at its height did Vice get? I mean, it had a high valuation, certainly.
Yeah, I believe the highest it got was $5.7 billion. And, I just felt like Shane's ambition to grow that company was insatiable. And there was a point where Vice was built on this youth cultural punk rock ethos. But, it started to feel like it was a wolf in sheep's clothing, where it was clothed in the garments and aesthetics of punk rock and youth cultural values, but it was really just a way for him to grow and get to this valuation and dominate media.
As you look back on it, do you think that that was inevitable in the sense that absolute power corrupts absolutely, or was there any way of avoiding kind of what Vice became ultimately?
I think there's absolutely a way of avoiding this. I always feel that when people, have the sentiment, oh, it's absolute power corrupts, everything ends up this way. Well, everything does end up this way because people are surrounded by other people who make 10%, 20%, 5% on what the other guy brings home. So people are incentivized to push people to keep scaling and keep going and all eat when you eat. But I think it's very important for people to stand up and say, you know what? I don't think this thing needs to be that big. I don't think the valuation needs to get here. I think the proper scale of this community or this voice is this.
And as you explore in the film, Vice went from that 5.8, whatever it was, billion valuation down to declaring bankruptcy. That's a pretty steep fall from those heights. I mean, is there a way to sum up what went wrong? I mean, it both seems like at some level a business failing, but in some way more of a moral failing and journalistic failing.
I absolutely feel it was a moral and journalistic failing. In the beginning, the magazine never purported to be journalistic, and I think that was when it was the most honest. But after David Carr of the New York Times did Page One and really took them to task for marauding as journalists, that's when Vice was like, we're going to become journalists and we're going to do it the right way. And that's when they hit the correct balance of this punk rock, cool guy aesthetic and ethos with the tenets of journalism. And I think for about 3 to perhaps 5 years, they got it right. But it quickly became clear that that wasn't what they came to do. It was like their parents told them, eat your vegetables, and then you're going to get to this valuation. So they ate their vegetables as fast as they could. But, Shane doesn't really want to eat his vegetables. He doesn't really want to be a journalist. He wants to make money.
People who know Vice or followed it or maybe follow it still know that one of the other co-founders is Gavin McInnes, which I don't know how to even sort of sum up the path that he has been on, and people may realize that he's founder of the Proud Boys. And you do trace sort of the evolution of his politics, and that there were indications even before that, this was a right-wing guy, but in a way it's similar to Vice in general, like kind of trying to have it both ways. Like, I'm a provocateur, but don't take me seriously.
Yeah, Gavin is probably the most problematic person in the history of Vice. And it's problematic because at the core, the things that people bought, the things that people were interested, it can be very much traced back to Gavin's voice and Gavin's interests. But those interests and those edgelord tendencies are entangled with hatred of a lot of different groups, whether it's women, whether it's Jewish people, whether it's immigrants. He's always seemed to had a bit of hatred for these groups, but he's always been authentic to himself. And when he was Fringe and it was just a free magazine that you could pick up and he wasn't a threat to people, I don't think anyone felt a need to step to him or stop him. But once the thing started to grow and started to gain value as a media company, that's when they had to throw him off the ship. But for me, the issue is that guy's embedded. It is his voice that is at the core of this magazine. You can't just get rid of the guy and be like, we're going to maintain the identity of this magazine that he created, but he's gone. You're still promoting and purporting his voice, which is connected to this deep hatred of certain groups.
You tried to do really original storytelling, and at some point, you really collided with what the culture was becoming. In other words, you get into this, that the Vice, its television pieces would do what you call ghetto safari journalism, going to Liberia, going elsewhere, Latin America. And the emphasis was on who's shooting weapons and that sort of thing. And you went, and then you did like a parody of that in a piece for Vice, which they didn't like. They didn't appreciate that.
No, they took it out because they didn't want to be challenged. And I think it was a very tough situation to watch your employer cover stories in Africa, stories in black communities, and it was always coming from this outsider, white hipster perspective, and they thought it was very funny, like fish out of water, drop the kid off. And I was like, I get to you and everyone in Williamsburg, it's very funny, but even if you just go to South Williamsburg, where like it's predominantly Puerto Rican, they probably aren't gonna like this portrayal, and at that time in the early 2000s when people were first starting to see images of these communities and these places, I felt it was very unfair that the first POV they saw it from was like a Trustafarian or a hipster from Williamsburg who like really wasn't invested in the community, right?
A Trustafarian. I love that. That is awesome. It struck me that they're really recapitulating colonialist perspectives in journalism. And if you accept that as a premise or a critique, you can see this, that actually their whole attitude, and you talk about Gavin McInnes and being very misogynistic, racist and all that sort of thing, is like they really have not done anything new. They've just repolished some old ways of thinking and doing.
Yeah, in many ways, it's like white angst is under that whole magazine where you know why you probably shouldn't have it, but you still feel the right to have it. And so I think that's who Gavin is. That's what Vice magazine was. And it just hit a moment with indie sleaze culture where it completely exploded.
Yeah. People know you from your memoir, Fresh Off the Boat, which became the ABC television series, very groundbreaking. You have some choice words to say. I think you've said that before. You're not creatively thrilled with how the show turned out. Whether it's Shane Smith and what you have to say about him or Fresh Off the Boat, what kind of reaction do you anticipate getting to the film? Because you're very authentic and really leave it out there. You don't pull punches.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. Like, I don't see any of it as a negative or criticism. I never wake up and say, you know what? I'm going to make a film that really fits the algorithm of what that streamer wants. I know that I don't have a mainstream voice. I really make films for the people that I feel have underrepresented voices. I will walk into any situation, and it's not just identity, but it's like, who is the little guy in this battle? And I try to take the side of the little guy or the disadvantaged. And in this case with Vice's Broke, I didn't want to do the straightforward, objective business analysis of the downfall. I think I left room for that. Somebody could absolutely come along and do that version of this film. I wanted to give credit to the early writers who really molded and shaped this magazine and this subculture that Vice was at the core of, and highlight them in their work, and also as a cautionary tale for the young people that are artists now. When you make art, you will approach at some point the intersection of art, commerce, and the truth. And I think you have to protect the truth.
a little Venn diagram, like maybe get smaller and smaller, a little bitty window there. What do you want to do next? You're a restaurateur, you're an author, you are a filmmaker, both nonfiction and fiction. So what are you going to do next?
Yeah, I have a script I've written
Okay.
in 2020 called Tuna Melt, and I would love to make that. It's a toxic rom-com is what I call it. And again, it's trying to tell.
Does the tuna go bad? Is that what
The
you're
tuna
telling
goes
me?
bad.
Oh, all right.
But it's trying to tell a rom-com from the point of view of like addicted or abused people, and showing that even with those backgrounds, you can have a happy ending. You know.
And just one final thing, premiering at Toronto, I think, is appropriate. You were mentioning the magazine, because Vice started off as a magazine in Montreal. So you're back in Canada, which is very appropriate. What does it mean to you to be able to premiere your film here?
Well, from the beginning, I told our producers at QC, Toronto's the festival I want to go to. It feels poetic. It feels right. I'm really grateful and humbled that they selected us. And I just remember being a little kid, like going to Blockbuster and seeing the crest. And I was like, that's probably a good film if it has the crest on it, you know. So
The
it means a
TIFF
lot.
crest.
Yeah.
Yes, the laurel. That's good to be able to slap that on your film. Well, it's an acquisition title, so we wish you best of success with the sales. I guess it won't be showing on Vice or whatever remains of Vice. Well, maybe. We'll see. Eddie Huang, thank you so much. The film is Vice is Broke. Congratulations.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.